Have you ever thought that aging is not the end, but rather an opportunity for a new chapter in life? We tend to think that as we age, we lose everything: our independence, our strength, and control over our own lives. But what if I told you that aging is a chance to reclaim those very things we once dreamed about? Let's face it, nursing homes promise care, but what's really behind these promises? Often, we end up in places that take away not just our freedom, but our identity. What if there's a way to stay in your own home, in your familiar surroundings, with support that makes life comfortable and safe? Of course, aging in place requires effort, but isn't it better to put those efforts into creating a better future for yourself than to let someone else control your days? All it takes is to stop believing in the myths and find the best path that lets you live not just to survive, but to truly live. This is your choice, and I'm sure you want to make it yourself. Chapter 1: The Loss of Control and Its Emotional Consequences. When I think about aging, the first thing that comes to mind is the loss of control. We all, at our core, fear this. We're used to thinking that our life is our own story, where we choose what to do and when. But what happens when those decisions start being made by someone else? When every morning begins according to someone else's schedule, when someone else decides when and what we'll eat, when we're allowed to call our loved ones, when we can watch TV or just go outside. It's not just inconvenient, it's painful. And you know what's even worse? We start losing not just physical control, but our very sense of self. At some point, you no longer know who you are because external circumstances become more important than your own desires. Imagine that every day in a nursing home is like an endless list of tasks made by someone else. Every morning you wake up according to their schedule. You have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and go to bed when they allow. All of this is done so life here runs on plan, but where are you in that plan? And without realizing it, you lose your right to make your own decisions. You don't decide when to get out of bed, when to take a shower, or when to talk to your family. These moments stop being yours, and with each such moment, part of you fades away. Your independence isn't just the ability to make choices. It's the ability to feel like you're the master of your life, your body, your time. And when that's taken away, you begin to feel like you no longer exist. When I look at people who live in nursing homes, I feel a deep sadness for how often they lose their individuality. These places, which promise care and attention, often turn out to be nothing more than institutions where people become numbers on a list, where they aren't seen, heard, or valued. They're given food, they're given medicine, but no one asks what they want, what they feel. This isn't care. It's just the fulfillment of duties according to a schedule. And this loss of control, it's not just a psychological process, it's a real trauma. Every day, you lose not just the ability to manage your life, but your very identity because your life stops being yours. I know many may think that this is a small issue, but when you grow old, you start to feel every day, every minute, like never before. When you become helpless, when you can't do what used to be ordinary, it's not just physical pain, it's inner pain, the pain of the soul. Your life is no longer the way it was, and you can't get it back. The problem isn't that you physically can't handle something, it's that all these limitations take away your very freedom. And the older you get, the more this is felt. What's even worse is when you're in a nursing home, you become part of the system. It's a place where everyone lives according to a schedule, where everything is decided by someone else, and you're left to follow. You stop being a person with a unique history, with preferences and desires. You become just another resident, someone who is managed, fed, and treated. But in reality, you don't want someone else deciding what your life will be like. You want to be alive, you want to be heard and respected. But once you enter this world, no one will tell you that your day will be what you choose it to be. And that's the greatest loss. I'm sure many of us have never thought about what it means to lose this control. We're used to thinking that aging inevitably means losing our freedom. But let's be honest, what could be worse than losing the ability to control your own life? And why do we let society decide what happens to us when we get older? Aging shouldn't mean the end of our identity. It shouldn't mean losing everything we once loved and cherished. Aging should be a time when we continue to live on our terms, not follow someone else's rules and demands. Chapter 2: Social Isolation and Its Consequences. Social isolation is one of those things we don't think about until we face it head-on. We're all used to being surrounded by people, communicating with loved ones, friends, and neighbors. But what happens when all of that fades away, when the number of people around us starts to dwindle and loneliness becomes the norm? When we find ourselves away from those we loved and with whom we were used to interacting, changes begin to occur that aren't always visible on the surface, but deeply affect us. Aging and loneliness are not just a physical condition. It's a real emotional struggle that isn't always visible from the outside. I remember, during one of my visits to a nursing home, I met a woman who was completely alone. She talked about how she once had a big family, how often her children and grandchildren would visit, and how her days were lively and full of conversations and joy. But gradually, her children became busier and visits became less frequent. Soon, they only came for big holidays. After some time, she realized that silence had entered her life. At first, it felt lonely, but she hoped things would get better, that her loved ones would come back. However, they didn't. Each day started becoming more and more like the last. And although she was surrounded by people in the nursing home, she felt isolated. This loneliness became not just an unpleasant condition, but it started to break her from the inside. What we often forget is that even when surrounded by people, we can still be lonely. We are social beings. We need communication. We need to see our loved ones and friends, talk, laugh, and support each other. In a nursing home, people are surrounded by other elderly individuals, but often this environment becomes sterile and disconnected. Staff members help, but their time is limited. Visits from relatives become rarer, and phone calls and messages grow even more infrequent. The feeling of loneliness becomes sharper. People begin to feel as though they aren't seen, that they no longer matter, that there is no one who will support or listen to them. And what's most painful is that this process happens gradually. At first, everything seems fine, just a little silence. But the longer time passes, the stronger the feeling that you're no longer needed, that your life is losing its meaning. The most surprising thing is that this process doesn't always depend on how many people are around. It depends on how involved we are in communication, how often and deeply we feel that our connection with the world matters. In a nursing home, where social interaction is supposed to be part of the daily routine and where people are surrounded by many others, it can become a trap. At first, all the roommates seem like good people to talk to, but over time, they become just other neighbors with whom you share a space, and the same conversations are repeated over and over again. The lack of real, deep, personal relationships leads to the person feeling forgotten, unseen, like an invisible part of the system. What happens to us when we stay in this loneliness? At first, it's just emptiness. Then comes depression, anxiety, and despair. We begin to doubt ourselves, our abilities, and whether we still matter to anyone. I've often wondered how this happens, how aging brings not just physical fatigue, but also feelings of rejection and isolation. And the scariest part is that as we grow older, we begin to lose faith in ourselves. We stop feeling like we can change something in our lives. It's a dangerous state, one that quietly but steadily eats us up from the inside.
Chapter 3: The Decline of Mental Health. We often underestimate how much aging affects our mental and emotional well-being. Aging is not just a physical change. It's an internal process that gradually but steadily changes our perception of the world, ourselves, and those around us. We're all used to thinking that aging comes with joint pain, decreased energy, and memory issues. But there's another, less obvious, but equally important aspect: how aging impacts our mental health. This is especially true in nursing homes, where all these processes occur much faster and more painfully. When a person loses control over their life, when their days are no longer filled with solving their own problems, but merely following a schedule, their mental state begins to deteriorate. Imagine waking up every day not knowing what will happen next. Someone else decides everything. When your day depends on when you'll be given breakfast, when you can go for a walk, when you'll receive a visit from a relative, this isn't just inconvenient. It's a total sense of loss. You stop being the master of your time and therefore of your life. This brings about an inner emptiness, a feeling of helplessness and meaninglessness. What's most troubling about this situation is that people don't always realize their mental health is deteriorating. Many believe that depression and anxiety are just a normal part of aging. But this isn't the case. When aging comes with loneliness and limitations, when everything around you happens without your participation, it becomes not just a problem, but a real psychological trauma. We begin to lose the meaning of life. We can't control what's happening to us, and this creates a huge emotional burden. In a nursing home, depression isn't just a state of sadness. It's a deep emotional pit that's hard to climb out of. When you feel every day that you're unimportant, just another number on the list, you begin to believe it. You start thinking that your life doesn't matter, that no one needs you. And this knowledge, this feeling, it eats you up from the inside, like a disease. Over time, you begin to notice how all these feelings affect your physical health. When the soul hurts, the body suffers too. Insomnia, loss of appetite, lack of energy, these aren't just the results of aging. They're direct consequences of your emotional state. I remember one elderly woman telling me that she stopped leaving her room in the nursing home. She no longer wanted to meet other people, didn't want to talk to anyone. She said that the world she used to enter with joy now seemed foreign and uninteresting. She stopped feeling like part of this world. And you know what was the most heartbreaking part? She didn't understand why this was happening. It wasn't just loneliness. It was the feeling that she was losing touch with herself, with who she used to be. As we age, it becomes harder to maintain our inner balance. When we're younger, with physical strength and opportunities, we can easily handle difficulties and stress. But as we grow older, it becomes harder to fight our internal demons. It's a struggle with loneliness, a battle with the loss of independence, with the inability to control our lives. This is a process we sink into as we age, but it's a process that can be avoided or at least mitigated. For elderly people, a nursing home can become not just a physical prison, but a mental one as well. Without the ability to make decisions for themselves, without the ability to be in their own home surrounded by familiar things, a person begins to feel how their identity starts to dissolve. And this isn't just uncomfortable or sad, it's a destruction of the very essence of who we are. We lose not just the ability to make choices, but also our sense of worth. We become those who are cared for by others, those who no one pays attention to. And when this happens, when this process drags on, we find ourselves in a trap. We can't physically escape this state, but our soul and mind begin to give in. And what about our physical health? When a person loses mental strength, their body starts to deteriorate too. It's like a vicious circle. Depression, loneliness, despair, and all of it leads to worse health. We begin to forget how important it is to care for ourselves, how important it is to maintain a positive outlook on life. When you lose the desire to take care of yourself, you lose the desire to live. This leads to a decline in health and a decrease in the quality of life. All of this doesn't happen overnight. These changes occur gradually. You don't realize how you're becoming a different person, how you're losing touch with who you once were. But the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to escape this state. Mental health isn't just about feelings. It's about how we view our life, how we assess its value. And when that doesn't happen, when we lose the sense that we matter, that our life means something, it begins to destroy us. It's hard to believe, but places like nursing homes can have a far more destructive impact on people than we imagine. It's not just a place for the elderly. It's a place where not only physical strength is lost, but also the soul. Here, in this environment, things happen that aren't immediately noticeable. But over time, you realize that it's not just a matter of illness or aging. It's a mental trauma that consumes you. In this chapter, I want to emphasize that physical aging is a natural process, but psychological aging, if it comes from the loss of control and loneliness, is not inevitable. We can remain healthy not just physically, but mentally, if we take care of our emotional well-being. And if we lose the ability to take care of ourselves, we don't just lose health, we lose the very essence of life. Chapter 4. The Alternative: Aging in Place. When we talk about aging, many people immediately think of nursing homes as an inevitable part of life. But what if I told you there's an alternative that allows you to maintain control over your life and not lose your independence? An alternative that gives you the ability to age in familiar surroundings, surrounded by things that provide comfort and warmth. Aging in place is a concept that allows elderly individuals to stay in their own homes with the support they need. It's not just a lifestyle, it's an opportunity to not lose yourself and your identity. Aging in place includes many elements that help maintain safety and comfort without leaving the home you love. The first step is to adapt the living space. Installing grab bars, improving lighting, creating easy transitions between rooms, these are just a few of the changes that can significantly improve quality of life for elderly individuals. These modifications make the home safe and accessible for those with limited mobility, allowing them to continue living in a comfortable and familiar environment. But aging in place is not just about physical adaptations to the home. It's also about using modern technology, like smart home systems, to control lighting, temperature, security, and other factors. With technology, you can create a safe and comfortable environment that's perfectly suited to an elderly person, ensuring their independence and security. For example, motion sensors can alert caregivers in case of a fall, security cameras can ensure safety, and smart devices can help track health and remind the person to take their medication. Another key aspect of aging in place is home care assistance. Many elderly people face difficulty with everyday tasks such as cleaning, grocery shopping, cooking, and even personal hygiene. However, home care services can solve these problems. Qualified caregivers can assist with daily tasks, ensuring comfort and safety without disrupting the person's routine. Aging in place is not just about physical convenience, it's also about emotional support. Elderly individuals often face loneliness and social isolation, especially when their children and grandchildren live far away. Staying in your own home allows for maintaining relationships with neighbors and friends, as well as staying connected to the world around you. It's important to remember that aging shouldn't mean being isolated. There are many ways to stay socially engaged, even without leaving home. Social media, video calls, volunteer programs, all of these give elderly people the opportunity to communicate, participate in society, and maintain activity. Additionally, aging in place is an economically viable solution. The costs of staying in a nursing home can be very high, leading to financial strain. Aging in place, with home modifications and home care assistance, is often a more affordable option. These costs are usually much lower than the expense of staying in a nursing home, making this option more accessible for many families. However, aging in place does require effort. It requires us to be willing to make changes to our living space and our perception of aging. It requires making new decisions, both for the elderly person and for their loved ones who need to support this process. But at the same time, aging in place gives us the opportunity not only to stay in familiar surroundings, but to retain our independence, identity, and dignity. We often fear aging because it's associated with losing everything we value, our control, freedom, and independence. But aging in place is a path that allows us to keep all these things despite our age. It's a path that lets us age without losing ourselves, without becoming part of a system that decides how our lives will look. More and more people are choosing aging in place because this solution not only preserves their independence, but also allows them to continue living a full life. It's an opportunity to age with dignity, comfort, and most importantly, control over one's own life. It's a choice that helps preserve what we cherish most in life, our independence, our history, and our identity. And above all, It's a path that lets us age without losing ourselves. Aging in place is not just an alternative to nursing homes. It's a real way of living that allows us to continue living the way we've always lived without losing our habits and memories. It's a choice that helps us preserve what we value most: our independence, our story, and our personality. And most importantly, it's a path that lets us age without losing who we truly are. Conclusion: reclaiming control and independence. Aging is an inevitable process that brings many changes, both physical and emotional. However, we often forget that aging is not the end. It is a new phase, and we have the right to decide how we want to experience it. We can remain the masters of our lives despite age and limitations if we make the right choice. Aging in place is not just a concept. It's an opportunity for each of us to preserve our independence, dignity, and quality of life without becoming part of a system that dictates how our old age should look. How often do we come across myths about nursing homes, about how these places promise care and safety? But in reality, they often turn out to be institutions where we lose not just our physical freedom, but also our identity. We become just numbers on a list, and life follows someone else's rules. Aging in place, on the other hand, gives us the chance to preserve the values that are so important to us: freedom of choice, familiar surroundings, connection with loved ones. It's an opportunity to continue living as we want to, in our home, surrounded by our memories. Aging in place is not just about physical comfort, but also emotional support. When we stay home, we not only maintain our connection to the world, but can also actively participate in life, communicate with loved ones, and maintain relationships with friends. This solves one of the biggest problems of aging: loneliness and isolation. Home care support, the use of technology, and home adaptations make this option more accessible and financially viable than moving into a nursing home. We live in a world where aging is often seen as loss. But why should it be that way? Why should we lose ourselves by becoming part of a system that ignores our needs and desires? We need to remember that aging is a time to continue living, not to end it. We can choose how the next phase of our lives will look, and aging in place is the path that helps us not lose what makes us who we are. Aging is not a battle against age. It's the ability to make decisions, preserve our identity, stay independent, and live on our terms. We shouldn't let others decide for us what our old age will look like. Instead, we should choose how to live in old age while still being the masters of our lives. Aging in place is the path that allows us to preserve everything we cherish and move forward with dignity. We all seek support, understanding, and a place where we can be heard, especially when it comes to important matters like aging. This channel is exactly that place, where we talk about real issues and do it together. If these topics matter to you, if you want to receive support and be part of a community where your experiences and opinions are valued, subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story is important, and it's what helps build this space for conversation and support. We're in this together, and you definitely have something to add to our discussion. Subscribe so you don't miss new videos and stay part of our journey.
I drift in your shadow, your breath keeps me still. The night wraps around us, bends time to my will. In dreams we are endless, no space in between. A place made of whispers where silence can sing. Every beat pulls me deeper inside. Your touch is a current, a velvet tide. Oh, wake me now, let this feeling abide. In your arms I'm forever.